Welcome to the Hidden Orchard podcast. On this podcast, we will explore the deeper concepts from the intersection of Jewish wisdom, the New Testament, and science. We will bring you fascinating insights from the ancient and modern sources, all with the goal of improving and getting the most out of life. Visit our website at thehiddenorchard.com to subscribe to our newsletter and get more information like this. Now, today's episode. Having grown up in the Catholic Church, and having worked on staff at a Protestant church, I cannot recall ever being taught Romans 11 in any depth. Perhaps this chapter presents a challenge to many prevailing theological traditions. This being the case, we will uncover the missing keys to Paul's message, making this challenge even stronger. In Romans 11, Paul leverages a few Midrashic themes from the Rabbinic oral tradition. Many readers may not be aware of these, but when understood, these further affirm the selection and the enduring covenantal place the Jewish people have with God. Paul begins chapter 11 by asking, "Then has God rejected his people?" By no means. He says this as if to stifle the seeds of anti-Jewish supersessionism. He continues with the observation that it was God who covered their eyes, an act that somehow enabled a redemptive foothold for the nations, verses 7 to 8. In verse 11, Paul states, had this concealment not taken place, the nations would have been in a hopeless state. He also makes this assertion in other letters as well. In Romans 11:16, Paul states, if the dough offered as first fruits is holy, so is the whole lump. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. This is important. To an observant Jew, this is a reference to a well-known Torah mitzvah, a commandment, known as hafrashet challah. Here, one breaks off a small piece of dough, or a fresh loaf of bread that's been baked, and they set this aside as an offering for God. In doing so, the rest of the loaf is elevated, making it worthy for consumption. This kind of offering is known as teruma, a word that means to elevate. The instructions for this are found in the Torah. Now, a parallel to Paul's words can be found in the Midrash, stating that the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were such an offering for the nation of Israel. Exodus Rabbah 15:6 says, our forefathers were the teruma of the Holy One, blessed be He. As it is stated, Israel is holy to Hashem, the first of his crop, quoting Jeremiah 2:3. Paul, extending this homily one degree further, makes the case that Israel are a similar offering for the rest of the world. Paul then leverages another rabbinic idea that can be found in various sources, from the Talmud to the Midrash, and even the Zohar, in which Israel represents an olive tree. In this metaphor, the Jewish people are a living tree into which the nations will ultimately be grafted. It's through them that salvation, redemption, will come to the world, a statement affirmed by Yeshua himself in John 4:22, when he tells the woman at the well, salvation comes from the Jews. In the next example, many English translations render the following passage in a very problematic way, one that proponents of replacement theology might actually appreciate. We read, but if some branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others, now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree. Do not be arrogant toward the branches. If you are, remember it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. Romans 11:17-18. The idea here is that the natural branches are broken off, thrown to the ground. However, Dr. Mark Nanos, a scholar of Paul, indicates that the word, often translated here as broken off, eklao, can be just as easily rendered as broken, cracked, or even bent, as one may do to a branch in order to graft in a new shoot. He says, the Greek word usually translated as broken off can be translated very differently and thereby communicate very different implications, both within the allegory of the olive tree and for the analogies drawn about Paul's view of his fellow Israelites. Eklao can be translated as broken, as in when a branch is bent so as to suffer a break or a crack. Although injured, it remains on the tree. If we replace the English words broken off with bent or cracked, we can then understand this in a new way. This helps us understand how the wild branches can still share in the nourishing root of the tree, which would not be the case if the branches were severed totally. What interests me in this interpretation is that the Catholic Church has come to a form of this understanding over the last century through its doctrine of Nostra Aetate. In this, they affirm the enduring covenant with the Jewish people. Dr. Nanos continues, a bent or a cracked limb is calloused to protect the injured area from further damage until it can be fully healed. In the meantime, it can continue to function within the tree toward its goal of producing fruit. And in this, all Israel will be healed, protected, preserved, or kept safe, as he renders that passage. Now, if you go to my website, thehiddenorchard.com, and you find this, or you go to the show notes, I have a link to this article, and it's well worth the time to read. Dr. Nanos does an incredible job. But now we're understanding this in a new way. Informed by the Midrashic tradition, we can see Paul's words and how they affirm the place of the Jewish people while still being inclusive to the nations. In this way, the original branches remain productive, bearing additional fruit through the grafting of the wild shoots. Rather than one of condemnation, Paul's message beautifully portrays the way in which God will continue to move forward his plan of global redemption, honoring his covenants and bringing revelation to those who were once far off. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information like this, again, visit our website, thehiddenorchard.com. Sign up for our weekly newsletter and look out for other articles posted there throughout the weeks. Reach out to us and let us know what you think of the show. Until next time, have a great week.